And that is our lead this hour. It comes from the courtroom, appropriately enough, former Dolphins head coach Brian Flores, who will likely never coach again in the NFL because he has lawyered up in a very large way. And if you didn't see this, I don't know how you missed it. You must have been putting your blinders on, your earplugs in, and the whole thing, because buckle up. It's a doozy. It is a doozy. You know I'm a sucker for these legal stories. I should have been a lawyer, but I failed. I failed the family and went to radio. So Brian Flores, let me give you the truncated version here, and then we'll expand on it. So Brian Flores unloaded on the NFL, literally and figuratively, filing a class action lawsuit against the Giants, the Dolphins, the NFL, and every other team in the league, claiming the race card from the bottom of the deck, racial discrimination. Now, Flores is the plaintiff. The NFL and the member clubs are the defendants. The complaint makes all kinds of wild allegations that he has to now prove. You can make the allegations. One thing about lawsuits, you can accuse anyone of anything in a lawsuit, but you actually have to be able to prove it. So we'll see if he can prove whether or not the Giants interviewed him only because of the Rooney Rule after already deciding to hire Brian Daboll as the coach. That's just the tip of the iceberg. This suit was filed in the Southern District of New York, and the main allegation here that has not gotten a lot of attention is something known in legal jargon as 1981 action. In layman's terms, because I'm a layman, or just a lame man, the civil rights violation is the claimant. This is a civil rights lawsuit by Brian Flores, and he named names and photos and graphics and all kinds of bells and whistles. It's available online. I read it, 58 pages. Tremendous bathroom reading, this particular lawsuit. I do recommend it if you're interested. So let us discuss. The question here on this one is simple. What are the chances that Brian Flores wins this lawsuit? You can sue for anything at any time. Doesn't mean you're going to win. So I am going to set the odds on this, having read all 58 pages of the legalese, at plus 1,200. Now, that doesn't mean a zero chance that Brian Flores is going to win, but it's pretty close. Roughly a 7% chance, less than 10% that Flores will stand victorious when everything is done. The much more likely outcome is a settlement. That normally is how these things are adjudicated. But my observations, you've got clothesline, Glass Joe, and haberdashery. And we're going to lock all of these things together, and we are going to make a tremendous made-for-TV trial if it gets to that point. So, number one, at first glance, amazing lawsuit. It's a blockbuster, right? Oh, my, the gift that keeps giving. This is not a one bucket of popcorn type of lawsuit. This is a 5 jumbo buckets of popcorn type lawsuit. Headlines, scandal, gossip. The most popular entertainment in American sport is being laid out by one of the coaches that's no longer coaching. And, of course, this led to the obvious visceral reaction that Brian Flores metaphorically flew down from the top rope, dropping a razor elbow on Roger Goodell's forehead, and he emptied out the bag. What's in the bag? You don't have to worry about what's in the bag. Flores put all of it. He put the clothesline out in the front yard, not even the backyard, the front yard, the clothesline's out, and he hung out all the dirty laundry. He is now seeing the sun. It's kind of like when Dracula sees the sun. It doesn't go well. Now, some of the highlights, or lowlights if you work for the NFL, Bill Belichick is prominently mentioned at the very beginning of this lawsuit. And that was one of the people that helped Brian Flores along with the Patriots. And now Bill Belichick has been tossed under the proverbial lawsuit bus because of some text messages. Belichick informing the plaintiff here, according to the lawsuit, I'm reading out of it here, Brian Flores, that 3 days before his interview with the New York Football Giants, that Brian Daboll had already been selected for the job. He quoted Martin Luther King Jr. in here, claimed that the claims made that Flores refused, this is a big one, the owner's directive to tank for the first pick of the draft. This goes back to 2019, the allegation being made that Dolphins owner Stephen Ross told Flores that he would pay him $100,000 for every loss. Listen, if you hire me, Stephen Ross, your job's open. Hire me. All right. I will, for $100,000 a loss, you'll go 0-17. Hell, you'll go 0-20. Well, I guess they only play a couple preseason games. 0-19. Man. Now, the general manager, Chris Greer, according to the lawsuit, told Brian Flores that Steve, meaning the owner, was mad that Flores' success in winning more games than he was supposed to, and that had compromised the Dolphins' plan to tank for the number one pick. Now, that is a poison pill. Having read all 58 pages of the lawsuit, that is the one that will be damning. That is the one that will end Stephen Ross. He will be excommunicated from the good old boys network of NFL owners. The first rule of tanking is to never let the secret out. Now, the question is this all verbal? Is this all verbal? Is this just, hey, conversations, no text messages, just conversations between Ross and Greer, who I believe is still the general manager of the Dolphins? So I'm pretty sure as long as he's the GM, he might have lifetime employment now. He's not going to spill the beans. So that's the big one, right? That's the one that can have the Dolphins get a new owner. Our friends listening in South Florida, Ross has been around for a long time, and the Dolphins have blown for a long time with Ross as the owner there. There's all kinds of rumors that he wants this big name here, there, and everywhere, and none of it actually happens. It's all just chatter. All right, now, secondly, Brian Flores is going to have his day in court. He's requested a jury trial. If it gets to that, of course, we mentioned the most likely outcome here is some kind of out-of-court settlement. And many knee-jerk types are claiming that this is an open and shut case, that he has more than enough evidence to push forward and to win this lawsuit. And I would push back on that and say, guess what? Having followed a lot of these lawsuits, and I'm not always right, but I'm never wrong, I don't see enough evidence here. Because when you take 3 steps back and breathe into a paper bag, you realize that it is a Herculean task that Flores and his high-paid Manhattan lawyers have to navigate through. It's a bunch of landmines and booby traps and all that. Because what I took away from this is the claims made by Brian Flores are mostly based on a foundation of hearsay. The big smoking gun, you say, is that's physical evidence. Bill Belichick text messages congratulating Brian Daboll on getting the New York Giants coaching job, only to realize, apparently, because Belichick's dumb, that he was texting the wrong Brian instead, and that Flores hadn't even interviewed for the gig. He said, well, that's it. That's the one. That's going to sink the NFL's battleship. And I say not so fast. And I'll tell you why. Because Brian Daboll was the betting favorite. I follow all the gossip that's out there. I'm sure you probably do too. There were rumors leading in that Daboll was the choice because the new GM of the Giants came from Buffalo, and that there was a connection there, that it was most likely going to be Daboll's job. And so in court, how do you prove that text message is definite, direct evidence? You can't do it, right? Now, I know that Brian Flores' lawyers are going to attempt to say that this is all a sham, and here it is. But there's absolutely no way to prove it, because the NFL will come back and they will claim that Bill Belichick was texting based on media reports, and that had claimed that Daboll had the job. He's 69 years old. He doesn't know how to use a phone. He any technology. He's a technophobe. They're going to paint him as a buffoon, Belichick, and doesn't know how to text. So that'll be a big part of it. But the way this works, and having, again, been around these things, doing the radio show over the years, you have to show written proof. There has to be a written contract that was signed, because reminder alert, that verbal and handshake agreements, while you say, okay, that's a big deal, it falls into a category along with hearsay and these text messages, which are vague and can be interpreted different ways. That is not damning evidence it's certainly not as over the top as many of the low information people that don't follow these cases seem to think it is. I mean, and a text message saying, I think they are naming Dable. That is the message that Belichick sent out. I think they are naming Dable. Now, think in this little word game is a weasel word. Like, I can think a lot of things. It doesn't mean it is a fact in a court of law. I'm sure you think things that aren't true, that you think are going to happen. I know a lot of idiots thought the Rams were going to lose to the Cardinals. They told me it. And then the same idiots told me, don't worry, Tampa Bay is going to beat the Rams. And then those same dum-dums tripled down on their bet and said, no. Now, we were wrong twice, but we're right. The 49ers are going to win it. But they thought that, right? They think something. Again, you think something, it doesn't make it true. And as far as the interview after the job had been given out, which is the big claim here that the job was given out, Flores did not have to interview to appease the Rooney Rule, which the NFL should just get rid of at this point. They probably won't. They'll just adjust it more. But the Giants had already interviewed Leslie Frazier, another Bills assistant, and the defensive coordinator in Buffalo, and Patrick Graham, the defensive coordinator for the Giants. So in the video game, if you were to say in this lawsuit, who's who, we'll go Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. And in this lawsuit, Brian Flores and his army of lawyers is Glass Joe, and the NFL's Mike Tyson. Now, it's possible that things will go right and all that stuff, but unlikely. The league has an army of lawyers on retainer. They can drag this thing out for a long, long time. I would assume that this is a high-profile case. It's a big law firm in Manhattan that I don't think Flores is paying hourly, that there's some kind of agreement here. This is great publicity for the lawyers, and this is the kind of case that will get them many other lower cases down the line. All right, final point. So we certainly hope Brian Flores thought this lawsuit out thoroughly. And this was not a spur-of-the-moment situation because the chances of winning are microscopic for Flores. He effectively has now ended his NFL coaching career at the age of 40. Keep in mind, you can coach most of these guys who are in the network coach until their 60s, or some of them in their 70s, at least as assistant coaches. And the other thing that Flores has to look forward to with these lawsuits is a lot of mudslinging, because you, as the consumer of football, will be used. That Brian Flores' lawyers will have useful idiots in the media that want to take down the NFL, that will trash the NFL and leak all kinds of stories. But the NFL's got a lot of friends that want access to the NFL. And so they'll leak stories about Brian Flores and what a scumbag he is. And any skeletons he's got in his closet will come out. And so that's the way this is going to work. It's character assassination on each side until this is settled based on the lawsuits. Listen, based on what I read, again, I hope that Flores visits the haberdashery, because he needs to be fitted with a new hat there. Cap of coaches, right? Colin Kaepernick 2.0. Some of this rhetoric in this lawsuit goes back to 1920. It's like a retrospective to a different era, different time. 100 years, over 100 years ago, 1920. Says the NFL is racially segregated and is managed much like a plantation. That's the kind of rhetoric that Colin Kaepernick was saying several years back, and talked about all the racism in the NFL and went through everything, point by point. So the lawsuit implied that 70% of the coaches should be black because 70% of the players are black. That was the implication I took away. If you read the lawsuit, it's online. Check it out yourself. It makes you wonder, though, why Brian Flores would even want to work for the NFL anyway. He paints with a very broad brush, at least his lawyers do, and I assume he's in agreement with his lawyers. He's in cahoots here. But the way this lawsuit reads, that the NFL's been a blatantly racist organization run by a bunch of white supremacists for 100 years. So why would you want to work for that organization, right? I mean, it's like, what are we doing here? They might as well, instead of the shield logo, they should have a white hood based on this lawsuit, much of the claims here. And Flores took a wrecking ball, again, to his career. As a general rule of thumb, I know how I relate to this. I've had friends of mine, good friends in radio, who have filed lawsuits, and Some of them have gotten settlements. Some of them have gotten a lot of money, and that's great, and they've never worked in the business again. They're gone. They're banished to Siberia. That's usually how this works, and so we'll see if it's different this time for Brian Flores. But this is quite the story, and this is kind of thing that's going to carry us through the NFL offseason. That and the Deshaun Watson trial. When in doubt, throw a courtroom story out. That's what I've always said.